What if everything we think we know about the origins of Christianity was incomplete? It's not a conspiracy. It's not a theory without tests. It is an echo that comes of the past, from the dust of the desert, from the ruins forgotten by the time and by the official history. For centuries, millions of faithful directed his gaze on Rome. The Vatican became as a symbol of power, faith, and continuity. But there's one question that's rarely asked, and that even fewer people dare to investigate thoroughly. Which was the first church Christian of the world? We are not talking of the first majestic temple, nor of the cathedral's medieval buildings that dazzle with their architecture. We are talking of the first sacred space built by persecuted human beings to meet, pray, and keep alive a flame that was just beginning to burn. That question is not just historical, it is deeply spiritual. Because searching for the origin of the church is, in He background, search for the origin of our own faith. And yet, the most of us have never heard talk from the place where everything could have started, a site so ancient that challenges the accepted dates, so symbolic that it changes the traditional story, so powerful that perhaps that's why it was silenced. Imagine a moment. The year is approximately 240 AD. The Roman Empire has not yet accepted Christianity. Following Christ is a cause for ridicule, marginalization, or death. And even so, in amidst that chaos, a group of believers decides to build something, not to show off, not to impress, but to endure. They build not with stone, but with faith, not with gold, but with tears. And that place remains standing, buried for centuries, hidden under layers of sand, blood, and oblivion. The official story does not speak much of it. Catechism books rarely do mention. But archaeologists, theologians, and historians who dared to look beyond the version's offices were left without words. This story starts with a search that does not belong to a single country nor to a specific church. It belongs to everyone who has ever asked themselves, where was that the faith took shape? Where did it become in community? Where was born the first altar? It is no coincidence that this question resurfaces now. We live times of questioning, times where the structures fall and where many silently seek to return to what is essential. The viewer of this video is not a curious tourist. It's a soul explorer, someone who does not settle for answers easy. That feels like there's something more, something that was hidden from us or simply forgotten. And today, together, we will lift the veil of time. We will cross ruins, ancient documents, buried secrets and symbols almost erased by time wind of the desert. Because the first church of the world was not made to impress, was made to last. And in that resistance, there is a truth that can change forever, the way we understand our faith, our history, and us themselves. Get ready to dive in a sacred mystery where each stone speaks, every shadow hides a symbol, and every silence holds a revelation. The search starts now. The Gospels tell us about a church born of the Spirit, forged in the persecution, consolidated in the faith of men and women who were not afraid lose everything. But how was that beginning? How did a community living under constant threat organize itself? To understand where was born the first church of the world, first we have to look at how lived the first Christians. Because they didn't start with no temples or bells. They began with fear and with courage. During the first 3 ages after Christ, to be a Christian in the Roman Empire was not an identity, it was a sentence. Anyone who declared themselves a follower of the Nazarene risked losing their freedom, his possessions, his life. Still, thus, they met. Where? In humble houses, in dark catacombs, in secluded caverns, in open fields under the moon. Every corner where 2 or 3 gathered in his name became in a living church. But eventually, something changed. The community didn't just want to share the bread and the word, wanted a place, a space, a spiritual refuge where I could to sow the seed of a new humanity. That transition from clandestine group to organized community was slow, almost invisible. There is no a single moment that marks the official start, but yes, there is footprints, traces on papyrus, in testimonies, in abandoned structures that today speak to us as silent witnesses of the past. One of the terms that appear in the oldest writings is Domus Ecclesiae, church house. It was a home common, adapted for liturgical functions. No marble altars, neither stained glass windows, only walls that witness sincere prayers, a place for the baptism, a table for the fraction of the bread, and a small community gathered under the cross. These house churches spread to Antioch, Jerusalem, Ephesus, Rome, each with his own history. But there is a detail that calls the attention of scholars. All these house churches share one characteristic. They were destroyed, replaced, hidden for centuries. And this is where a suspicion begins to emerge. Was there an older, more complete church that remained hidden until recently? In Heart from the Middle East, where the borders they have changed 1,000 times and the sand has buried empires whole, lies a city forgotten by the majority, Dura Europos. I wasn't there in the tourist map, nor in the pilgrimage routes, but archaeologists of the 20th century, when excavating what seemed a Roman site more, they discovered something that defied all chronologies established. Within the walls of that city, walled, covered by centuries of dust and conflict, they found a structure that looked different. It wasn't a pagan temple. It wasn't an ordinary house. It had symbols. It had remains of a space baptismal. He had inscriptions. And the most shocking thing, it had images of Jesus, painted before the image of Christ was converted in official symbol. This finding baffled the academic world, because if the calculations were correct, that structure dated back to around of the year 240 AD, before Constantine, before the Edict of Milan, before Christianity ceased to be persecuted. So, what was that place? An adapted house? Another Domus Ecclesiae? Or were we looking at the first church Christian intentionally constructed as such? There is no absolute certainties, but yes, there is a truth that is beginning to be made irresistible. The roots of the faith Christian. They are deeper, more mysterious, and more forgotten than what we were told. And in that lost city in the desert, perhaps, is found the first concrete sign that the followers of Christ, even under threat, are already. They dreamed by raising not only a symbol, but a sanctuary, a place where the faith was not only lived, but celebrated. There are places that are born to be remembered, and others that seem destined to be buried by the time. Lasts, Europos belongs to the second category. For almost 1,700 years, this city slept under the sands of the desert Syrian, like a capsule of the time waiting for the right moment to wake up. Located on the banks of the river Euphrates, near the current border between Syria and Iraq, Dura Europos. It was a multicultural city, a crossroads between Greeks, Romans, Persians, and Semites. Founded in the 3rd century BC, was conquered by Rome, then abandoned after a devastating siege, and forgotten. Until 1920, French and American archaeologists, they began to excavate its ruins. What they found over there, it was a surprise after other, intact walls, decorated houses, pagan temples, and a small building that would change everything. At first glance, it was just another house. But in its interior, something differentiated. Remains of a baptistry, Christian symbols painted in the walls, and, what most striking, images of Jesus. Not as a glorious king or as a heavenly figure, but as the Good Shepherd, carrying a sheep in the shoulders. Simple, human, deep. The paintings were deteriorated, but still showed biblical scenes. The healing of the paralytic, Jesus walking on the waters, the Samaritan woman in her well. These images are key, because before the 4th century, Christianity was a persecuted faith, and the religious iconography was extremely limited. But here, in Dura Europos, those images already existed in year 240 AD, and most importantly, All the building was organized around a community experience of faith. There was a space for the meeting, another for the teaching, a room with the decorated baptistry, and an area designated for worship. It wasn't a makeshift house. It was a hidden temple. The experts say, so confirmed, Dura Europos housed what, until today, can be considered the first building Christian intentionally designed to be a church. But why? Nobody talk about this. Maybe because it doesn't fit with the official narratives. Perhaps because it is in Syria, a place marked by decades of conflict and destruction. Perhaps because its existence forces us to rethink origins, institutional of the church. Or perhaps simply because the sacred is uncomfortable when it cannot be controlled. It is true that this early church was carefully built by a community living under threat. Each brick placed his faith in danger. Each painted symbol was a statement of spiritual resistance. Instead of hiding, these believers consecrated a space, the they did yours. It made sacred. And that one act of bravery left a mark that neither Hittite, nor the empires, nor wars managed to erase it completely. Today, what remains of Dura Europos is in risk. Part of the place was damaged during the recent armed conflicts in the region. Some artifacts were looted. The structures, once protected, were left exposed to vandalism and indifference, but the memory remains. And in the museums, in the archaeological archives, in the hearts of those who they look for the truth, the story of this little girl church survives. Not with bells, not with marble altars, not with grandiose proclamations. Survive as it did in its beginnings, in silence, in resistance, in pure faith. While many they look to Rome to find the origins, there is a small voice whispering from the desert. Here also where it all began, and that voice deserves to be heard. The history of the Church of Dura Europos is not only fascinating for its antiquity, but by the silence that surrounds it. Because one would expect that a structure so, with archaeological evidence, previously unpublished images, and a dating so early, was celebrated in all religious circles of the world. But no, very few they talk about her, very few they know, and the inevitable question is, why? To understand that silence, first you have to observe the interests in game. The story of the Church, as an institution, is not just a chronicle of faith, it is also a narrative of power. Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, these cities have fought over each other for centuries. The title of Heart of Christianity, each one keeps relics, basilicas, martyrdoms, apostolic thrones. Accept that a small city, Syria, without prestige, without domes, without pomp, could, having hosted the first church Christian of the world, not only break schemes, also redistributes prominence. But the problem is not only political, it is also theological, because the discovery of Dura Europos sample a Christianity without hierarchies, without complex liturgies, without symbols of power, a horizontal community, gathered by the faith and not by the structure, and that is uncomfortable. Throughout the time, several theories have tried to relativize the importance of the finding. Some, they said it was just an adapted house. Others claimed that the paintings were too primitive to be considered Christian art. There were even who suggested that the chronology, I could be wrong, but the studies are overwhelming. Carbon dating, the analysis of pictorial style and architectural records, they agree. The place was used as a church Christian before the Edict of Milan, before Christianity was legalized, when even being a believer was an act of resistance. So what prevents this truth is spread? Here appears the enemy common in our narrative, the planned ignorance, a system that decides which truths are told and which are archived, a structure that, perhaps without bad intention, it ends up favoring the dominant narrative and leaving out the stories that could transform our understanding of the faith. And if that were not enough, the armed conflict in Syria came to seal the fate of Dura Europos with an extra layer of tragedy. During the Civil War, the archaeological site was invaded, looted, and bombed. Valuable fragments were lost, and many of the paintings were destroyed or stolen. The damage was irreparable, and for many, that was the excuse perfect to stop talking of the subject. But still, there are documents, photographs, published research, and most importantly, the persistent memory of a truth that refuses to die. At this point of the journey, the viewer is no longer just a curious person. He is a witness. He has seen what others ignore. Have you heard what the system has wanted to silence, and now has a choice? Stay with the official history, or look beyond of the veil, because every mystery revealed is not just a piece of the past. It is a door to the present, an invitation to rethink what we think we know, to ask ourselves if the faith we inherit is complete, or if it is still missing, discover its most humble, purest, truest roots. And while the powerful compete for cathedrals, relics, and monuments, in the silence of the desert, the Dura Europos stones, they continue to shout an ancient truth, that the faith does not need power to exist. It only needs a heart willing to believe. There are discoveries that change the history, and there is others that change the human being. The Church of Dura Europos belongs to both, because we are not just talking about stones, ancient, nor archaeological artifacts. We are talking about the living trace of a faith that was born under threat, that was sustained with hope, and who dared to build sanctuary where it seemed impossible. That little building in half of the desert does not impress with its size, nor by his decoration. It has no domes, it has no stained glass, it has no thrones, and yet it has something that many modern temples have lost: spiritual purity. On its peeling walls, one can still perceive the urgency of a community that did not seek power, but presence. That did not need structures perfect to feel God, but silence, water, and word. Dura Europos reminds us of something essential. The church did not begin as an institution, but as a community. It was not born of the marble, neither of gold, but of the resistance, of shared love, of inner fire that no one persecution could turn off. And that is precisely why this discovery has an incalculable value, not only for what it tells us of the past, but for what it demands of us in the present. In a world where the faith many, sometimes it becomes spectacle, where the spiritual is confused with the superficial, where the temples are filled, but the hearts are emptying. Dura Europos emerges as a voice crying out from the silence, go back to the essential, return to the simple gesture, to the sincere prayer, to the living community, because that was the essence of Christianity in its beginnings, and perhaps even today, that is its most authentic form. This discovery, it also breaks a myth. We were taught that the beginning of the church is linked to Rome, to grandiose structures, to declarations imperial, but what Dura Europos shows us is that the faith blooms in the margins, in the periphery, in the hidden, and so has an immense symbolic power. It reminds us that we don't need titles or recognitions to live by the sacred, that the oldest temple, it can be in a simple house or inside us themselves. Because yes, this story, it is also personal. The true temple is not the stones. We are you and I. We are a living temple when we open space for the sacred in our decisions, in our relationships, in our gaze. Dura Europos was forgotten for centuries, but its message is eternal. And today, knowing his history, we bring you back to life. We give you back your voice, your strength, its light, and that light, although dim, can light fires in thousands of hearts. So this isn't just the end of a story, it's the beginning of another, a story that depends on you, on how you choose to live your faith, on how you share what you know, on how you keep alive the calls. Snap revelation touched your heart, make her run. Because there is many there outside looking for it, same as you, truth, hope, origin, meaning share this video with who love the mysteries of the history and the secrets of the soul. Like if you felt something ignite inside you, subscribe and join us on this journey through the hidden corners of the faith, because still remain many stories to be revealed. And in each one may lie the key to understanding who we were, who we are, and who we can become.